All right, so you're looking to learn to use authentication on your project, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project real quick, just so we have everything blank and not forget anything. So I have this dialog here, new project authentication or something. I'll accept the things. I'll create a new project real quick. Here, while the project is being created, I'm going to create a new project on StackBlitz. All right, so now we have this project on Firebase, and here we have a real quick new StackBlitz project where we will play around, and we'll be able to download that as a Create React app project as well. So here's what we need to keep in mind when we need to authenticate our users in our applications. First of all, we will need to enable the sign-in methods that we're going to use. The easiest one here is Google, because, well, Firebase is by Google. So it would be the easiest way to implement authentication on our application, so that users would just be able to click the button, login with Google, and they would choose their Google account and log in. But then it's not the same as you wanted to allow them to register with email and password, right? So if you want to allow them to register themselves, then we will enable this feature here, email and password. After we enable that, we'll go to Docs and see what we can do. Let's go to Guides, and in the authentication, we care about the web. Here's what we will need to keep in mind. So this is just something that we would only need to do if we want to allow users to log in or create their user with email and password. We don't really need to create them if we just want to use Google authentication, which is the easiest. So in case of Google authentication, we just need to call two lines essentially of code, provider Google Auth provider, and then just the part of this one, and you could ignore the rest of that for now. Firebase Auth sign in with provider, or sign in with redirect.
I have a quick question. For a Create React app for the folder and file hierarchy, would it make sense to create an individual like sign-in.js file or a folder? Does it matter?
Would it make sense to create a sign-in with JS? Yeah, well, probably you could have a login. You could have a login component in your app. You can just clean this up a little bit. So in the login component, you could just render one here real quick. Let's say we have a login component, and then we'll create a login JS here.
Awesome. Okay. I was just curious. I was like, how's that going to work? Okay.
Import. Yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. Login from, it's the other way around. Import login from there, from the login JS. It's going to find it there, but right now we don't have anything here. We need to import React from React here to start a new one. And export default. Let's start with something real quick. Return div. All right. Now it recognizes that as a component. Now, we might have a user property here, which could be null by default. And if the user is logged in, we will want to populate it with something.
In a create React app, usually it's app.js the way you're using the index.js. Does it matter?
It does not really matter.
Okay.
It only matters where the Webpack will start bundling your code.
Okay.
So it would be part of the Webpack configuration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you can do this inside Create React, right? Where it already has a built-in compiler.
Yeah, and you can literally export this project here, and it will be a Create React app folder here. So I'm gonna show it real quick. So let's say we have this folder downloaded, like here. All right, so this is the folder that was downloaded, and it has exactly the files that we've created here. So here we have the login.js, and if you like, we can just install the dependencies from package.json and start it up locally and develop it as a local Create React app project.
Oh, very cool. Okay. I was just curious because I'm paying attention to every detail. This is great.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Do you need React Router for Firebase logins or no?
Do we need a router? We can definitely start our project and test out authentication without the router. So router will be useful when our application is actually will have pages, so to say, or screens that the user will navigate through. But right now, we'll just explore how to implement a simple authentication just to understand it without the complexity of other components. And
Okay.
yeah, and after we do that, we can move to router as well and try how it works together. So we
Oh,
don't have a problem
perfect.
understanding.
Yeah, I understand. This is just focused on Firebase.
Yeah. So right now, I will just start by importing Firebase to initialize a new Firebase, well, to actually connect my project, my React project, to Firebase here. So I'll just create a new constant Firebase app. I will initialize that app with, and I'll click install package while we have that. And we pass it config that will import from a file. So I'll just create config.js here for the Firebase authentication. And I'll just export an object by default, which will contain all the configuration of our project that I've just created. All right, let me save that, go back to here, and that was just something we got because of the hot reload. It didn't completely refresh the page. And so now that we have the Firebase app initialized, we will go back to implement our Firebase authentication. So there are two parts to Firebase authentication. One part is going to live somewhere in the root of the project, like here, and it'll constantly listen to whether the user is being authenticated or logged out, essentially, logged in or logged out. So that is going to be a callback method that is called onAuth state changed, and it'll call a function when the authenticated state of the user changes. So it changes when they log in or log out. So I'm just gonna grab this part for simplicity, and I will add it somewhere like component did mount. So that's going to be a function which is going to be executed automatically by React. And we will install our function here. And the reason I install it here is because I know my app is going to be mounted exactly once. And we want to start listening for the changes exactly once. So the function that I passed to on auth state changed is going to be executed multiple times because it was already installed. So whenever the user logs in or logs out, we're going to get the user. So what we need to do here is, in this case, just pass the user to the state. I already have this user in the state prepared. So just this set state, and I'll pass user. And that's a shortcut in ES6 here. Yeah. So if I have them as the same name, I can just delete the second part of the object. So it will set the user key to be the user verbal value. Does it make sense?
So you initially set it to null or undefined. That's how you use the APIs. By default, you set it to null.
Yes, yeah. So when my application starts, I set the user to null because I don't know whether they authenticated or not. That's something that Firebase will need to tell me, because Firebase is going to know whether they are authenticated or not, but I do not know that in advance.
Okay,
so,
that helps a lot.
Yeah, so when the component mounts, this function will set the callback function for when Firebase is ready to tell us whether the user is logged in or logged out. So initially on the page load, this function will be called exactly once, and Firebase will tell us that if the user is authenticated, we will get the value of that user parameters. Or if they are not authenticated, it will be null just as well. So it's just going to pass the empty value.
Excellent.
Yes, and later, when we ask Firebase to authenticate a user, it will call this function once again, and it will repeatedly call it when the authenticated state of the user changes. All right, so we'll get back to this function, so that's fine. Let's see what it tells us. There is an error. Authentication is not a function, so that's because we need to import from a Firebase Auth, import Firebase Auth. So we already imported Firebase, and we just needed to import the package that we are going to use on the Firebase as well here. And now we have Firebase with authentication, and that allows us to use this method Firebase Auth, which gets us all the methods from the authentication, from the auth of Firebase. So it no longer complains again. Now, let's set up a simple check for the user. Let's get the user constant user and take it out of the state, this state. Now we will check if the user is there logged in. It will say logged in if the user is there, otherwise it will say logged out. Now, of course, it should say logged out. And now we want to implement a login button. We'll go back to our login.js here. We will, and let's see what we need to do to authenticate the user with Google. Once again, it is just two lines that we need to execute when the user presses the login button, for example. So we will have a button that will say, let's put a button here, login with Google. Yeah, we now have the button. It doesn't do anything, and that's great. And we will have an on-click. So when the user clicks the button, we can have a function, a login function executed. I guess let's make it a class real quick. Class login extends component, and we'll take component out of React here as well, and we'll export default login. And it's going to be render method here. That's great. Well, it looks funny. Let's see if we can fix it by. I'm just going to refresh the page and see whether it fixes that weird color coding. Okay, that's better. So now we have this button, and we'll tell it to call this login, which is going to be a custom login method that is going to be executed when the user presses the button, and it will call these two lines. The first one will define the provider to be Google Authentication provider. And the second one, well, there are a couple of optional steps that we can skip for now. And the second crucial part is to call Firebase Auth sign in with provider. Yeah, and it returns a promise. So actually, you can call then or catch, and you can actually get user credentials here in the callback, yes, that's right, in the callback of the promise, right? So when the promise performs. But why do we not care about that? Is because we already have a listener in our app.js here. We already have this on-auth state changed callback. So it's going to be executed when the state of the user actually changes anyway. So that's why we don't really care to add anything but these two lines. So we set up provider to be Google Auth provider, and then we execute this function sign in with pop-up, or we could also, instead of pop-up, we could use sign in with redirect. Yeah, we could choose redirect. So pop-up will work great on regular websites, but if it is a mobile device, there are no pop-ups, and sign in with redirect could be a better option. So anyway, because we use Firebase, we will need Firebase imported on this page as well. Firebase app. Just copy that here. Now it knows what Firebase is. No, there are no errors so far. And let's see what happens when I press login with Google. Nothing happens. Let's try with pop-up first. And we need to open that in a separate window for pop-up to actually work. Yeah, so, well, it does work. Where did it go? Let me see if we get any errors. Can it parse? Oh, yes. There's one more thing that we need to keep in mind, and that is the authentication is actually protected by domain name. So back to our authentication in the console, we have these authorized domains. So by default, localhost is already authorized. So when you develop on local machine, you don't need to do an extra step, right? And it's easy to forget, and I actually forgot that now, to add this domain as an allowed domain, that I actually control this domain, and I allow this authentication to work on this domain. So after I have added my domain of this example application to the authorized domain, let's try it again.
Great. So that's the same thing I would do if I were to deploy it.
Yes.
Whatever the new domain is live. Awesome.
Yeah, that's right. So so it's great to try it out here. And I'm gonna log in with one of my accounts on Google, and it now says that I'm logged in. And also, because Google already knows a lot about me, I can render. I'm actually going to go back to this window. I can render user information. I can render some user information about that user. So it keeps saying logged in. And actually, let's try with redirect, right? With redirect. I cannot log in because I'm already logged in, and my button still says login with Google. It shouldn't say login because I'm already logged in, right? So I actually want to pass information about the user which is in the app, because in the app we've got it from onAuthStateChanged. Once again, onAuthStateChanged calls this function that I've created anytime user logs in or logs out. So it will update the actual state of the user and passes it to the state. So I'm going to pass it to the login component. This just the user from the state, so that the login component would know whether the user is logged in or logged out. So if the user is there, let's get the user from the props, const user this props, swap it into color braces, and now we're getting the user from the props. Now here we need to complete this one. If the user is there, we will render a logged out button. Log out. Otherwise, we will render the login button we already have. So now it actually renders the logout button, which will log the user out, and we will need to use Firebase Auth sign out for that. And remember, this guide is actually good, so you can look up anything that you're not sure about. I think the sign out is somewhere here. Describe maybe in the manage users. Sign out. Maybe in the password authentication. Yeah, there it is. So to sign a user, I call sign out just like that. And once again, I don't need to worry about the promise being returned and handling that, which would be a good idea to process if anything goes actually wrong, right? So the catch would tell us what the error is. But for now, we'll just create a simple logout function, which will just call Firebase Auth sign out. And click this sign logout. Logout is the method that I created. So I'm going to pass it to the logout button. And when I press the logout button, it now tells me login with Google again. So it knows I'm logged out now. So what will happen if I press it now? I've changed my login to sign in with redirect. So let's see how that looks. Login with Google. It actually replaced all the content. It took me out of the app to show me, well, it should show the authentication interface. And now we are confused about why it doesn't work again, because the domain we're on is different now. Let's try it in the actual window that has the domain that I've authorized. When I press login with Google, I am presented with this interface to log in. And now it actually takes me back to my app. So it loads from fresh, right, from the ground. Now it recognizes that I am logged in now. So I would also like to render some information about the user. And the Google example shows that you can take some user data out of the user. And I can, as a simple example, for example, I'll have a div here with the user information. I'll have a check if user, then render this div here, and it will print some user information here. And I'm going to do that in a simple way with JSON stringify, and I'm just going to stringify all the user data, and that's my personal data actually, because I'm the logged in user, so you can kind of see all the things about me, and I can just print my email instead of that, user email. So now it'll just print my email. I can get my avatar that I have on Google. So when your users log in into your application with Google, you can automatically display their avatar, their data, so they will feel like at home.
Cool.
Yeah. Any questions at this point?
No, it was more than I expected because you did a log in and log out.
Yes, yeah.
Cool.
So this component has two buttons, log in and log out. So I can log in and then log out. And we don't really handle the user data here, as you can see. It's just the event itself, right? So we are telling the Firebase that we want to log in this user, or we want them to be logged out when they press the button. And the actual data is handled elsewhere. The actual authentication and handling the user is done in the on-auth state changed. So we can keep it as it is, and we can also implement the password authentication. That's where the user would be able to create their own account and then log in with that account. So I'm going to log out here, and I guess I'm just going to create a new div here and that will say create account. And it will feature a form. We will have a couple of fields here for email and password. And submit button. Right. So we get this simple form. This is going to say, let's put a placeholder here, folder name, or rather email, and this one will say, this one is just going to be the password. So this is going to be my email, and I'm just going to do something like, and this would be my password, and when I submit, I will take those values and pass them on submit, handler this create user. So right here we can have more functionality for creating a new user, create user. Now we will need to get the form value somehow here, and to do that I guess I'll just create a ref to this input fields, ref this, let's get a bit more room here, L this email input equals L, and the password is going to be password input.
What's L stand for? Element?
Yeah, so here's what's going on here. When React renders these elements, and remember these are just create element calls, right? So they are just JavaScript objects, and they are actually created later as DOM elements by React. So if we inspect them, we actually get them as DOM elements, which are created by React. So at that moment, when React creates them, it will call this function that is my custom function and passes the element being created here. So I can save the reference to this element as my custom variable reference. So now this allows me to create a reference to the input for the email as this dot email input, and password input is going to be the reference to the input field for the password on the screen. And because these are actually going to be DOM elements, we can also mark them as DOM email input, DOM password input. They will have value. So if value is going to be, now this one is going to be constant email, and the second one is going to be constant password. This DOM password input value, just because that's a DOM element reference, it's going to have value for whatever the user has typed at that particular moment. And now all we need to do is call create user with email and password. Let's copy this whole part to see if something goes wrong. It'll call this catch here. Let's replace that function with an arrow function. I'm just going to console warn create user error. Just we'll see what's going on if something goes wrong. And now it's password. Just put it here. So they match. Now we have email and password. So that should create a new user when I type my email. Just something very simple at gmail.com. A simple password here. When I submit, let's see what happens. Oh, right. Yeah, because I forgot something very important, and that is to cancel the form event prevent default, which will prevent the user, prevent the form from redirecting the page to another, to the next location, essentially. That's what form does by default. It refreshes the page, it takes the user to the destination, and we need to prevent that action, that default action. I'm actually gonna go and check whether the user was not accidentally created. It actually was. Check this out.
Oh,
So it actually created the user anyway and redirected the page.
Well, that answers my next question. I was going to wait until after you were done So Firebase handles the storage?
Yes, yeah. Firebase handles the storage, and all the users that will be created are going to be in Authentication tab. Now, what's important is Authentication doesn't allow you to have any manual information about those users. So you will need to keep that metadata about those users in the database.
Awesome.
Yeah, but you have this automatic table with the users as their login. I'm just going to create a new one for this clean example. Out2@gmail.com. Now I'm going to submit. So, well, it's just my one password. Tries to save my password, but because I didn't handle this form in any way, it looks like nothing happened, but Firebase actually created, well, did it? I'm not sure. Let's see. And let's keep an eye on the console. G at plus auth 2 or 3 maybe gmail.com. Maybe I mistyped something, so it tells me, you see there's a catch error coming from. Here's how it's helpful. There's something wrong with my email, so I didn't accept that. Create user error, and I actually get the error from Firebase telling me that email was not valid. So now I'm gonna try another one. Let's see, this one should be valid, and I'll just type a password here and submit that. Let's clear this out. Submit, and wow, you see that? It actually recognized me as a logged in user. So now I'm logged in as this new user, and I have this new record in the authentication.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Firebase makes full stack more optimized and
yeah,
easier.
absolutely. Yeah, I don't really need any backend to handle my own, on my own because I can just open a StackBlitz or just create an app with Create React App, and I will have all the tools that I need to handle users, store the information in the database, upload the files to the storage. Yeah, and I can host the project itself on the hosting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I always wanted to know how to do user authentication and login with social media. Firebase is amazing.
Yeah. And there's one last piece here is that I can only create an account, but I cannot log in with email and password. So Firebase has my password stored. This is my user ID in my application. This is unique to this application. Like it is not shared among other projects. So I have this record, and I should be able to log in with this email and password. I don't really want to create a new account. I just want to log in, right? So in fact, I'm just going to copy this whole part, and it's going to be login with email and password. Now this one is going to say login email password. So DOM, this is going to be log in and log in password, login email password, login email input, and login password input. So now this is going to be in the method handling login with email and password. Let's remember to prevent a default immediately before I forget. And in a similar way, I will get the input values from this form, DOM login email input, DOM login password input. So now I have email and password. And let's see how I can authenticate a user with email and password. This one is create user with email and password, and this one is sign in with email and password. So it is just as easy as creating the user. I'll just have this function here, and there's a catch just to see if something goes wrong. I'll have a console warn here just to see login in error, and it will print the error if there's a problem logging in. And that should actually be it. Let me see where the typo is. Oh, I guess I forgot to complete my arrow for the arrow function. So now that everything is correct, I have these two forms. And in the actual application, I will, of course, hide the irrelevant ones. Now I kind of have everything displayed. And it shows that I'm currently already logged in with this user. And I'm going to log out. Now it shows that I'm logged out, and I can log in or create a new account. Let's actually try to log in. I'm going to copy this user that I've created here, and I'm going to type my password and submit that. And see, I'm now logged in. That's it. I'm logged in as that user because my password matched. And if I log out, if my password was not correct, I'm going to submit that. And I actually get an error handled by the Firebase, and it will tell me that the user typed wrong password. So I can actually display this error to the user. I would put it to the state somewhere, and it would be displayed to the user, so the user would know what's going on.
Yeah, validation.
Yeah, some validation. So this is just a quick example, and we actually are within the hour that we can now actually authenticate user. We can create new accounts for the users.
Wow.
And yeah, and as a bonus, I would actually go ahead and try publishing this project on this domain, on the hosting. Would you like to see that? So I'm
Sure.
going to export. I have this folder downloaded now. Now this is the zip folder that was downloaded. I'm going to unpack it. Now I have this folder with the project. I'm going to rename it as project. And I'm going to open it in Visual Studio Code. And because it is a Create React app, I will go to terminal and install npm install everything. It will go to package.json and install all the dependencies that we used on the project. So Firebase package.json lists Firebase because I used it. It's listed in the dependencies on StackBlitz. Yeah. So after it installs all the dependencies locally, we can run this project locally as well without needing the StackBlitz anymore. And we will be able to publish it on the Firebase.
Oh, that's even.
Yeah, that's
so it does everything: authentication, database storage,
yeah,
and then also deployment.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah. Just within an hour, we can have a published application.
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Let's go to hosting here while it is downloading the things and see what they say here. So to use hosting, let's go to get started. To use hosting, we will need to have Firebase tools installed globally. This G flag means globally on my computer. I already have it installed on my computer, so I don't need to install it. But when you start working with Firebase, you will need to install them once. And then you will need to call Firebase login. Once again, I'm already authenticated on Firebase on my local computer, so I don't need to do that. But this part is done per project. So I will need to call it on this project. When it's done downloading dependencies, I will call Firebase init. I will call Firebase init. Now it's done. But before I do that, I'm actually going to check whether it is able to start. There's npm start function, and it should start my project locally. Yeah, it actually started. It opened the browser window with this project, and I should see exactly what I had on StackBlitz. This is the project that I've downloaded, and yeah. I have this login with Google button, so yeah. Once again, this is the interface, and it works locally, so you can do everything locally and try it out. Yeah, so now I'm logged in on my local application. Yeah, it recognized me, and I should be able to log in with email and password as well. So let's continue to actually publish in this application. So I'm going to call Firebase init. I'm going to stop this and call Firebase init. Now it will ask me a few things. It actually tells me I need to update Firebase tools once in a while. You need to update
Firebase.
Yeah, this nice logo here. So we need to enable the things that we want to use. Right now we want to use hosting. We don't really care about functions. We don't care about all the other things, database and storage. We don't use them. So I'm just going to use hosting for now. And then I will need to find the project, new project auth, right? So I've chosen the project. And now this is the important part. It asks me which project I want to upload. Yeah, so it asks me which one is going to be the public directory. And I do want to change it. I don't want to use public because public is already used by Create React App to serve my local one. So it's actually going to be build. And so instead of public, I'm going to choose build as the public directory. So that's going to be the folder that is going to be uploaded. And why? Because when I call npm run build, it will build the project to the build folder. So that's why I've chosen the build folder to upload. So that's going to be my optimized build for production. And now it's going to ask me whether I want a single page app rewrites. Well, yeah, I generally do, because that's what I would want for React Router. And that's it. We can now call npm run build. That will create the build folder and populate it with the production version of my app. It's going to have build.js, just all the JavaScript files in one file. And if I had any images, they would also be optimized. So now that's it. I have the build folder, and I'm ready to upload it with with Firebase Deploy. So I can just call Firebase Deploy, or I can create a new script here that will say deploy. All right, so I'll choose Firebase Deploy, and I can now call npm run deploy, and it will actually call Firebase Deploy because that's what the script is. So now it calls Firebase Deploy, and it will use my link to the project, and it actually tells me that upload is complete and my app is live on this URL. And that's it. I have a published app. new project auth, firebaseapp.com. Let me see, it doesn't look live. So if something doesn't look good, we can go to this hosting tab and see the deployment history. It says it has 9 files uploaded. Well, usually you will immediately see your project. I'm not sure what the problem is. So there's a syntax error. There's a syntax error. It couldn't find the file. Yes, that's a typical problem with Create React App, actually. So I think it has my home page. Yeah. Yes. If you didn't know that, you would spend a lot of time looking for what the problem actually is, because you do have the file. Now, it will tell you that the problem is with the JavaScript file not being there. You see main.js, and it is actually in the build, and the static.js, main.js. So everything looks good, but it doesn't work. And then you would look at the source of this HTML and see that the path to the script is actually edit React static. So this part is not something that we have in our structure. So to fix that, I'm going to remove this home page path. Actually, I'm just going to remove it altogether, because that's where the edit and this part comes from. Okay. So I'm going to call npm run build, and actually I'm going to npm run deploy immediately after it builds with this command. So it's going to build and deploy, and after that everything's going to be good, and we will see our published project.
Right.
Okay, it is deploying and it's done. Let's refresh the page. And that's it. And that's it. We have our published project in just 1 hour. We've built a simple application that can accept new users, and we have it published on Firebase.
That's amazing. That would have took me days and weeks to
Yeah,
do.
sure, absolutely.